few days after the shooting of Charlie Kirk, my husband asked me if I had heard any conspiracy theories. And I told him I didn't have to hear any conspiracy theories. I had just heard what the FBI had been reporting, and the facts clearly did not line up. So something definitely seems fishy here. Something is not as they are saying. Maybe Tyler Robinson, the man who they have charged with the murder of Charlie Kirk, maybe he didn't do it. Maybe it was someone else, or at least I don't think he acted alone. At the very least, for some reason, the FBI has changed their story multiple times about what happened. So today I want to look at 9 or 10 different pieces of evidence that I've found on the internet that indicate to me that things are not quite as they seem. You know, the left and the right are kind of arguing about the political motive or not of this murder. And the right, though, especially is doubling down on this leftist motivation for killing Charlie Kirk. You know, that the man who killed Charlie Kirk, that he had inscribed the casings of the cartridges in his gun with etchings that were anti-fascist and purporting gay and transsexual type of propaganda, memes related to that. And so the right media, I've seen this on Fox News, I've seen it on Daily Wire shows, is really doubling down on that. And I feel like they are falling hook, line, and sinker for what seemed to me like essentially planted clues, like this thing is staged, when there's so many facts that just don't line up and fit that narrative. So the first thing we're going to look at is the timeline that the FBI is saying this all happened in. So they say that he took this shot. Now, it's really interesting because they have this video. It's from the computer science building. It's a 360 camera. And there are numerous other cameras on this campus that for some reason they're not showing the video of. They're only showing part of the video from this one camera. And in it, we see a man fleeing from the rooftop where they're saying the shot was taken from. But for some reason, they don't show the part of the video where he takes the shot. So we don't know for sure if this really is the man who shot Charlie Kirk, but we see a man fleeing, and here's the timeline on that man.
It's that 360-degree camera that's absolutely, I believe, picking up all those movements that they mentioned in the probable cause document were picked up in that. He goes through that door, then he goes up that sort of staircase onto the roof. They can see all of that happening. And then he goes over, steps over at 1217 over a little wall. And then he sits there for 5 minutes and does something. I think he's probably assembling some portion of the gun or something. And then he runs at 1222, sprints over, lies down, fires at 1223, and he's already off the roof in the same minute, 1223. And then he's across the street at 1224, getting rid of the gun. I mean, that's insane, right? So
that is insane, right? So they're basically saying that in a 1 minute time, he went from laying down and taking that shot to, they say, he took the barrel off the gun, and that's why we don't see it in the video of him running across the roof, because it was mostly concealed on his person somehow. I think they're saying that the barrel was concealed on his person, and then the main part of the gun was wrapped in a dark towel. That's something else we're going to look at in a few minutes here, because that's not something that they're being consistent on either. But so they say he took the barrel off the gun and ran across the roof and jumped off and was across the street in less than 2 minutes. Seems pretty hard to believe to me. Okay, and then as to them talking about the barrel of the gun being removed, and we'll come back and we'll look at this, him running across the roof and what that looks like. But, you know, they're saying the barrel of the gun was removed, and here was what Michael Savage had to say about that.
And jumping off the roof, it looked very legitimate to me. However, there was no rifle in his hand. Now, the Mauser does not break down very easily, incidentally, for those of you who know weapons. Something's wrong with the whole thing. They're trying to claim he removed the barrel from the Mauser and fit the receiver and stock in his backpack and barrel in his pants leg, all in 2 seconds. It is not easy to remove a Mauser barrel or index it after reinstalling and remain accurate. We are not hearing or seeing reality. And by the way, the photo of the rifle allegedly left in the woods has the barrel installed. So we're supposed to believe a guy.
And so he's talking about, let's see, this photo here. We see the barrel of the gun attached to the gun.
Is on the run after killing Charlie Kirk, and he pauses in the woods to reinstall a barrel, and then he leaves it for us to find, the FBI to find. I don't believe a word of it.
I don't believe it either. That doesn't make any sense. So first of all, Michael's saying that if he had the barrel off the gun so he could conceal it on his person as he was going to the spot where he was going to take the shot. And, you know, the FBI has released these photos of this man in the stairwell. He's not holding a gun, but they're saying what was concealed on his person. Theoretically, a 40-inch barrel is like down his pants leg. That's kind of weird, though, because we see his right leg bending here and his left leg bending there. So I don't see how that could be. And then the main part of the gun is apparently in the backpack. But then he puts it on. But Michael's saying that if he put it on, it's hard to put it on in a way that the gun will still be accurate. Okay, that requires a lot of precision. But apparently he did that. And then after taking the shot, he took the barrel off. They said that again so that when we see him running across the roof, we can take a look at that in a moment here. That explains why we don't see him holding the gun, this long rifle. But then in the picture that they show of the gun that they found right here in the woods, the barrel is on. Also, the gun is now in a box. He put the gun in a box. Like, when did he have it in a box? Where was the box when he was going up the stairwell? Right here. They're saying that the barrel was down his pants leg, but now the gun is in a box. So it really, really doesn't add up. Let's take a look at that video of him running across the roof here. So the computer science camera is over here. It's taking a look all around. So the man is running right here. He's running right now behind these windows. I don't know if you can see that here, but he's going right here behind these windows. And here he comes. And as he comes to the edge, and the FBI did this zooming for us, delightful, he lays down something. It looks like a jacket or possibly a towel, as they say. He picks it up there. He drops it when he comes to the ground, picks it up again. And then as he's walking, you can see it swinging, swaying. In fact, maybe it's even a backpack. It could possibly be a backpack, the way it swings and sways. It looks more like a jacket to me. But it definitely does not look like a rigid object, a long gun like they are saying, the way it swings and it sways. And there's no way he did that jump with a 40-inch barrel in his pants leg. So all of that just really does not add up. Now, another thing that I would like to bring your attention to is the fact that despite all of the cameras around this campus, for some reason, the FBI has only released the footage from this one 360 camera, which they have edited. Like I said, they did that zoom in there. They're only showing us this one angle. And let's see, where was it? We had someone here talking about the timing on this. Apparently, they've cut this down for the saving of space down to about 4 or 5 frames per second from what was originally a 30 frame per second video. And if we had the 30 frame per second video, we would be able to see a lot more detail with the movements of these objects. It would be a lot more clear. And then we also have the situation where they are only sharing these few still images from the video in the stairwell. Why is that? Why didn't they just release the video? It's obviously much easier to recognize someone, which that was what they were trying to do here. You know, they released these images because they said they wanted the public to help them recognize this individual. It's much easier to recognize someone from a video where you can see, you know, the movements of their face and their body and their height and things like that. So why did they only release these stills? Seems like maybe it was because it would have been obvious that this man was not concealing a long rifle. You know, I think they said it's a Mauser M98 on his body. So none of those things really seem to me like they add up. We also have, like we said, this image here that was released by the FBI showing the gun that they found, quote, in the woods. This gun is in a box. It's not in a dark towel. The barrel is attached. And yet this photo does seem to be of them finding it in the woods, since there's grass and somebody's boot in the photo. It's not like taken in a lab or something like that, you know, where maybe evidence is being examined. So it seems awfully odd that the FBI would have put the barrel on the gun. and tampered with the evidence in the field like that, I think they would have brought it back to whatever their headquarters are. And as Michael Savage was saying, it's very improbable that the suspect reinstalled the barrel of the gun when he dropped it in the woods. Another little thing I'll point out, and I don't have anything to show you here, but the shot that killed Charlie, they are saying, was taken from that rooftop. It's about 140-yard distance. And so that would be a reasonably skilled sniper shot. But there's no evidence, they haven't shared any evidence that 22-year-old Robinson had any such training. And further, apparently, according to this photo, now I'm no gun expert by any means, but this channel over here. Okay, so this is a channel where this man talks all about guns. And he says that this scope on this rifle is installed incorrectly. So incorrectly that it'd be very difficult to take that shot. What he's showing here is that the scope should be over here, this distance from the shooter's eye, but the way it's installed, it would be like a solid inch or so closer to his eye, which would make him not be able to focus through the scope. So not only does this man not seem to have any training to take this shot, but also his scope isn't even properly attached. So that seems a little unusual. Now, this next point is just, again, something that's inconsistent, incongruent with the FBI story. They share that first he arrived on campus in a red shirt and light-colored shorts, and then he changed his clothes to this dark outfit that we see him wearing in those photos from the stairwell, okay? I don't know why. I don't know when he changed his clothes. And I know the reason that they're saying he was in these clothes was because these are the clothes that, they see him in these videos. But they also needed to show that he arrived on campus. And so they have a different video of a man walking into campus in this other outfit. And they matched that outfit, the red shirt and the light colored shorts. That outfit apparently matched the outfit that he was wearing when he was arrested, which seems rather odd. Why did he put those clothes back on? I don't know. Why is he changing his clothes back and forth? After he did that, wouldn't he probably, after he committed the crime, wouldn't he probably go and put on completely different clothes? It's just something that's a bit odd. I don't know what to make of it. Now, something that I think is perhaps the most fishy thing about what the FBI is saying is that first, they told us that they had gone and essentially interviewed the boyfriend. I think his last name is Twiggs, and that they had talked to him and he'd been very cooperative, and that he'd showed them messages on Discord where Tyler Robinson, the purported shooter, essentially confessed to doing it, where he was talking about needing to go back and get the gun from the woods, and where the roommate being Tyler, was recounting the contents of a note, or rather the roommate, I guess, being Twiggs, recounted the contents of a note that the suspect had left elsewhere. Later that we get some more details on that kind of conflict or contradict that. In these messages on Discord, apparently Tyler stated the need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, having wrapped the rifle in a towel, okay? But what this article here from TMZ says is that Discord says the platform wasn't used for this purpose, okay? Discord did an investigation, and they found the account associated with the suspect, but found no evidence that the suspect planned this incident or promoted violence on Discord. They couldn't find any of these messages that the FBI shared. Okay, that's a little bit weird. What made it weirder, okay, you tell a lie and then you get caught in your lie and you're like, oh, actually it was this way, and it makes it look so much worse. Well, that's exactly what the FBI did, because after that, a couple days later, they released a bunch of text messages between Robinson and the roommate, Twiggs. And there's two things weird about these text messages. First of all, that they include some of the very same contents that previously the FBI said they had seen in these Discord messages. So now they're just contradicting themselves, such as talking about needing to go grab the rifle, and that he needed to grabbed the rifle from a drop point. And these aren't all the messages here, but pretty much everything that they had said were in those Discord messages. Now they're saying was in the texts. The other thing that is weird about this, I guess two more things. One is they switched from, the platform Discord where they could be fact checked, to now the platform of texts where nobody can really fact check them. But the last thing is these text messages, and I realize now I wasn't showing you guys, here are the text messages. These text messages, they're not how 22-year-old boys write. I'm sorry. This is not how 22-year-old boys text. There is way too much punctuation, much too long of sentences, much too long of texts. It's just much too detailed. I don't buy it. And further, they read alike when somebody writes a novel and there's dialogue in that novel to advance the plot, like to explain what's happening to the reader. And I think it's just a little too convenient. Okay. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is basically, did Israel do it? So in short, the reason I want to address this is because a lot of the people who are doubting the FBI narrative, doubting what the media is telling them, are immediately jumping to believing or assuming that Israel is somehow responsible, specifically Netanyahu, the Israeli government, is somehow responsible for Charlie's death. And that may or may not be true. I don't know. Candace sure seems to believe that it's true. As Dave Smith pointed out on his show over the last couple days, there's no evidence that Israel did it. There is no evidence of that. And so I don't know. But there is evidence that Israel had a motive, that Israel and Charlie were not necessarily on the best terms. And there's also the evidence that Netanyahu is hiding something, I would say. So let's take a look at this clip of Netanyahu on Fox News just the day after Charlie was killed.
Was an extraordinary friend. He said, he wrote me a letter on May 2nd this year. He said, one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances to defend Judeo-Christian civilization. A few weeks before the tragedy yesterday, I called him and I spoke to him and I said, please come to Israel. I invited him to Israel. And sadly, that visit will not take place. But he was a defender.
So he says that he invited Charlie to Israel. He declines to mention whether or not Charlie took him up on that or if he declined. He also, Netanyahu, does not tell us the context of this letter at all. It seems a little odd that Charlie would write a letter to him just telling him how much he liked Israel. What's the purpose of that letter? He had already had other conversations with Netanyahu. Why would he take the time to write a letter that just said, I really love Israel? So I know Candace has called for Netanyahu to release the full contents of that letter, give us some context. Seems like maybe Charlie was sharing some challenges that he was having with Israel, or something along those lines. It's just a little bit odd that Netanyahu would be coming on Fox News right away to advance this particular narrative. We can also take a listen to some things that Charlie shared when he was on Megyn Kelly's show about a month before he was killed.
However, my contention here is that some in the pro-Israel camp are so knee-jerk about calling you anti-Semitic or getting deeply offended if you say anything that doesn't align with their narrative, that it undermines their own cause. And I have to tell you, I find it very irritating because I do feel like some of us have earned the right to have some credibility on the subject of Israel and don't want to be called those names when we have some mild pushback on some of the overreaches.
And then you can hear kind of Charlie's response here.
However, and I will say this, the behavior by a lot, both privately and publicly, are pushing people like you and me away. Not like we're going to be pro-Hamas, not like we're going to, but we're like, honestly, the way you are treating me is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megyn, calling me an anti-Semite. I am learning biblical Hebrew and writing a book on the Shabbat.
Now, Charlie sharing this on Meghan's show in this particular interview is especially telling because apparently this happened just a couple days after Candace alleges that multiple pro-Israeli people, multiple Zionists, were really coming down really hard on Charlie and threatening him even, and trying to push him to go back to his previous positions of just being an unapologetic supporter of the Zionist movement, of Israel, of the Israeli government, and to stop questioning everything. There are also multiple sources reporting that Netanyahu offered Charlie and his organization multiple millions of dollars, which Charlie declined. Presumably, he didn't like the strings that were attached. So I'll just say again that there is no evidence that the Israeli government or Netanyahu were involved with Charlie's death. But it is interesting that he has been really pushing against the left for years, about a decade. He has been arguing with the left. And it's only been a month since he started questioning Israel publicly. And now is when he was killed. So I do find that timing quite suspicious, at least. But there's no evidence that Israel did it. There's just evidence that they had a motive, and of course, they had a means. So that's everything I wanted to share with you today. Thanks so much for listening.